Washington Square Park, New York City. Late afternoon, October 1967. Michael Torres sat on the stone steps near the fountain with his beat-up acoustic guitar across his lap. He was 22 years old, had been in New York for 3 months, and was not a very good guitar player. He knew this. Everyone who passed him knew this too. He played House of the Rising Sun the way 100 other street musicians played it. Slow, predictable, safe. His voice was adequate. His fingers found the chords eventually, though not always cleanly. People walked past without stopping. A few dropped coins into his open guitar case, more out of pity than appreciation. The October light was fading. The park was busy with students from NYU, tourists taking photographs, locals cutting through on their way home. Michael had been playing for 2 hours and had maybe $7 in his case. Enough for dinner, not enough to matter. He'd come to New York from Phoenix with big dreams and a mediocre skill set. He'd thought the city itself would teach him something. It hadn't worked that way. He finished House of the Rising Sun and started it again. Same tempo, same mistakes in the same places. His E minor chord always rang a little dead because his third finger wasn't pressing hard enough. He knew this. He'd known it for months. He still couldn't fix it. That's when he noticed the man standing about 10 feet away. Tall, thin, wearing a military jacket and a wide-brimmed hat. He carried a guitar case. He wasn't watching Michael exactly. He seemed to be listening with his eyes closed, head tilted slightly, like he was hearing something beyond the notes Michael was playing. Something underneath the mistakes, perhaps. Something Michael himself couldn't hear. Michael felt a flash of self-consciousness. Being ignored was one thing. Being studied was another. He considered stopping, packing up, leaving. But he kept playing. The man didn't move, didn't drop money in the case, just stood there, perfectly still. When Michael finished the song, the man opened his eyes and walked over. He didn't ask permission. He didn't introduce himself. He simply set down his guitar case, opened it, and pulled out a white Fender Stratocaster. He sat down on the steps about 3 feet from Michael. Michael stopped playing and looked at him. The man was tuning his guitar by ear, turning the pegs with quick, precise movements. His fingers were long and moved with absolute confidence. "You want to play?" Michael asked. The man looked up, smiled slightly, and nodded. He didn't speak. Michael started House of the Rising Sun again. He played the opening chord progression, waiting to see what this stranger would do. The man didn't play lead. He didn't show off. He played harmony, simple supporting notes that filled the spaces Michael was leaving empty. His guitar wasn't plugged into anything, just acoustic sound from the Stratocaster's body. But somehow it cut through the park noise. Clean, precise, perfectly placed. Michael kept playing, but now he was listening to what the stranger was doing. Really listening, perhaps for the first time in months. The man was finding notes Michael hadn't known existed in the song. Little runs between chords, bass notes that created movement, harmonic touches that made the simple progression sound rich and complex. And the strange thing was, the man wasn't trying to impress anyone. There was no flash, no showmanship. He played with his eyes half closed, making himself smaller rather than larger. Every note served a purpose. A few people stopped walking, then a few more. Michael had been playing in this park for weeks and never attracted more than a passing glance. Now suddenly a small crowd was forming. 20 people, then 30, creating a loose semicircle around the steps. They didn't talk. They didn't move. They just listened with an intensity Michael had never seen before. The stranger played as if the crowd wasn't there. His eyes were closed. His fingers moved across the fretboard with an economy of motion that made everything look effortless. He wasn't working. He was breathing. Michael tried to match him, tried to keep up. His own playing tightened, became more focused. He found himself listening to the spaces between his chords. The stranger's presence was doing something to his concentration, making him listen instead of just play. They went through House of the Rising Sun 3 times. Each time, the stranger found something new to add. Never overwhelming, never taking over, just supporting, enhancing, revealing layers in a song Michael thought he'd understood. Then Michael started Hey Joe. He knew it from the radio. Recent song, straightforward blues progression. The stranger opened his eyes when he heard the first chord. Something changed in his expression, but Michael couldn't read it. The man's fingers found the progression immediately, and he started playing a counter melody that wove around Michael's rhythm like smoke. The crowd grew larger, 50 people now, maybe more. They weren't talking. They were listening. Some had their mouths open. A few were recording with small cameras. Michael noticed an older woman in the front row with tears on her face. She wasn't crying exactly, just letting tears fall while she stood perfectly still. Michael glanced at his guitar case. Money was piling up. More money than he'd seen in 3 months of playing. Bills, not just coins. He saw a $5 bill, then a 10. Someone had dropped what looked like a 20, but he couldn't think about the money now. The stranger was playing a counter melody that required Michael's complete attention. If he lost focus for even a second, the whole thing would fall apart. It was like walking a tightrope. The stranger was creating a net underneath him, but Michael still had to walk the line himself. They played for 20 minutes. Blowin' in the wind. The times they are a-changin'. Simple folk songs that Michael could manage, but with this stranger's guitar speaking beneath his own, they sounded like something else entirely. Something deeper. Something true. Then the stranger stopped. He opened his eyes, looked at Michael, and nodded once. A small gesture of acknowledgement, or perhaps goodbye. His expression was gentle, almost apologetic, as if he regretted having to leave. He stood up, carefully placed his Stratocaster back in its case, and walked away through the crowd. People parted to let him through. A few tried to follow him with their cameras, but he moved quickly, disappearing into the park's pathways between the trees. Within seconds, he was gone, swallowed by the October dusk. Michael sat on the steps, breathing hard, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at the crowd. They were looking back at him, their expressions strange, confused. "Who was that?" someone asked. "I don't know," Michael said. "You don't know him?" "Never seen him before. But you played together like you'd rehearsed." "We didn't rehearse anything." A young woman in the front asked, "What's his name?" He didn't say anything at all." The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly. People dropped more money into Michael's case as they left. Someone left a $20 bill. Michael packed up his guitar and counted the money. $43, more than he usually made in a week. His hands were still shaking, not from fear, from something else, from having touched something beyond his reach and somehow, impossibly, not falling. That night, Michael went back to his apartment in the East Village, a fourth-floor walk-up he shared with 2 other musicians. His roommate Danny was sitting on the couch when Michael walked in. "How was the park?" Danny asked. "Weird," Michael said. He set his guitar down. "Some guy sat down and played with me for like 20 minutes. Was he good?" "He was..." Michael tried to find words. "I've never heard anyone play like that. He barely did anything, but everything he did was perfect. Made my playing sound better than it is." Danny turned down the record player. "What do you mean?" "He found notes I didn't know were there, made the guitar sound like 2 instruments, and he did it without trying, like breathing." "Did you get his name?" "He didn't talk. Not once. Just showed up, played, and left." "That's strange." "Yeah," Michael said. "It was." He didn't think much more about it that night. His mind couldn't hold the experience. It kept slipping away, like trying to remember a dream. New York was full of talented musicians, probably some session player having fun, staying anonymous. 2 days later, Michael was at a diner on 6th Avenue having breakfast. Danny was with him, reading The Village Voice. Danny suddenly stopped mid-bite of his eggs. He stared at the page, then slowly looked up at Michael. His face had gone pale. "What?" Michael asked. Danny didn't answer. He turned the paper around and pushed it across the table, his finger pointing at a photograph. There was a photograph, a concert review. The headline read, "Jimi Hendrix Experience Sets the Fillmore East on Fire." The photograph showed a man on stage leaning back with a white Stratocaster, hair wild, face caught mid-expression in what looked like ecstasy or pain or both. The same military jacket, the same hat sitting on an amplifier beside him, the same long fingers on the guitar neck. Michael stared at the photograph. His hands went cold. The diner noise faded to white static. "That's him," he said quietly. That's who? The guy. The guy who played with me. In the park. His voice sounded like it was coming from very far away. Danny looked at Michael, then at the photograph, then back at Michael. You're saying Jimi Hendrix sat down on the street and played House of the Rising Sun with you? Jimi Hendrix. I didn't know it was him. Did anyone else there know? Michael thought back. The crowd. The cameras. The way people had stopped and stared. The woman crying in the front row. The young woman asking for his name. Maybe some of them had known. Maybe that's why they stopped. But no one had said his name. No one had asked for an autograph or made a scene. Or maybe they were all like Michael, seeing a stranger with a guitar, hearing something extraordinary, but not understanding what it meant, not believing it could mean what it meant. I don't think so, Michael said. I think he just looked like some guy. What did he say to you? Nothing. He didn't say a single word. Danny sat back. Jimi Hendrix played a free concert with you for 20 minutes and didn't tell you who he was. I guess so. Michael picked up the newspaper and read the review. It described Hendrix's performance at the Fillmore East 2 nights earlier. The guitar solos that bent reality. The feedback that sounded like voices. The way he played with his teeth and made it musical. None of that had happened in Washington Square Park. In the park, Hendrix had played quietly, simply, serving the songs Michael was playing, making space for someone who barely knew what he was doing. Michael had been street performing for 3 months. He'd been ignored by thousands of people. The one person who stopped to play with him was Jimi Hendrix, and Hendrix had acted like Michael was worth listening to. Why would he do that? Michael asked. Do what? Sit down with me. I'm nobody. I can barely play. He could have been anywhere, playing with anyone. Danny shrugged. Maybe that's exactly why he did it. Michael kept that newspaper. He folded it carefully and put it in his guitar case. He kept playing in Washington Square Park, but something had changed. He played differently now. He listened more, left more space, tried to find the notes that served the song instead of just filling time. Years later, after Hendrix died in 1970, Michael told the story in interviews. By then, he'd become a decent guitarist, teaching music in Brooklyn, playing small clubs on weekends. People asked him if he'd ever spoken to Hendrix again. No, Michael said. That was the only time. Do you think he remembered you? I don't know. I don't think that mattered to him. What do you mean? I think Jimi Hendrix heard someone playing guitar and decided to play too. I don't think he needed a reason beyond that. Music was the conversation. The rest was just noise. The interviewer asked Michael if he had any regrets about that day. Only one, Michael said. I never thanked him. You didn't know who he was. I knew he was someone who took 20 minutes to make my music sound better. I should have thanked him for that. You don't need to know someone's name to say thank you. The story became something people talked about in New York music circles. The day Jimi Hendrix played on a street corner and nobody knew. The gift he gave to someone who'd never expected it. Michael Torres kept playing guitar until he was 73 years old. He never became famous. Never made a record anyone remembers. But he taught hundreds of students, and he always told them the same thing his mysterious street partner had shown him without words. Make space. Listen. Serve the song. Leave the ego somewhere else. Music isn't about being better than someone, he'd say. It's about being present with them. Someone would ask where he learned that. From a stranger in Washington Square Park who played beside me and never told me his name.